Tellez Maldonado. I'm a newlywed, and I'm very happy to be with you guys here today, especially on this topic. This is one of my favorite topics, actually, crisis, which is kind of weird because most people like it when we're calm, right? Um, I want us to kind of start in a happy place today, okay? So I want y'all to think back to like watching TV, and then you would see on the screen, Calgon, take me away, right? And it was just like this really luxurious bathtub with lots of bubbles, and you're like, oh my God, don't I wish I was there right now? So I want all of us to take a moment, get real cozy, get comfy, feet on the floor, hands on our armchair or on your legs, and just think about what is your happy place. When you are stressed, where do you go in your mind? Personally, for me, I pretend like I'm in one of those like half lawn chairs right where the water meets the beach, and I swear like I like my hair is not frizzy, and I have a really good drink in my hand. And sometimes when I would be talking with my clients, I would just be like, let me take a little time out and visit my private beach. So I would love to hear, where are your guys' happy place? Is it a mountainside? Is it a valley? Is it just like the bathroom for 5 minutes and no one's knocking on the door? What do we think, Norma? Does anybody put any answers in yet?
Nobody has mentioned anything on the chat line, but we
Okay,
have.
this is Linda. This is Linda. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Linda.
Hi.
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear
My,
you.
my my happy place is when I just feel like a little overwhelmed. I because I'm here anyway, because so I can't go anywhere except to the grocery store and back, and that's got to be like
Right.
6 o'clock in the morning because I'm over 60. But my happy place is my praise and worship to God, and so I just got off of that because I'm sitting here like, you know what? I'm not feeling this. It's getting to be a little bit too long. They say they're going to open up malls. That's my little happy place at the mall too. So I haven't been
Thank
doing
you.
that. So the outlet mall at Rosemont. So but my happy place is when I turn on some YouTube and listen to praise and worship. So that's
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Can
And
I get
Eva,
one more, Norma?
yes, we have someone who listed that when she is at the park with her son on a summer day.
Okay.
Okay. So even if we haven't contributed an idea, or maybe you're like, I don't know, Eva, let me think about that. Hold on to that thought because we're gonna come right back to it, okay? So the focus of today's session, the takeaways that I want to have with you guys is number one, how do we avoid conflict and crisis from the get-go? Because a lot of it is preparation. And I think that sometimes we forget, especially when things start accumulating. Okay. Another thing is like how to recognize when we're stressed and when our children are stressed. Okay. And, since we are families, when our partners are stressed and how that can kind of weave into the whole thing. I'm going to mostly be focusing on parents and children. And if I say women, I do mean parents. I see a lot of women here, and I'm used to working with women. So that's not to say that one is better than the other. That's just, a little oops on my part. Okay. And then we're going to talk about how to keep the volcano from exploding. So we got things that are brewing sometimes, and sometimes it just needs to happen. So how do we keep it from being an explosion? And let's keep in touch with reality and remember that volcanoes explode. There are perfect conditions that can contribute to that, and there are perfect ways to clean it up when it happens. Okay. And then, since I am a domestic violence professional, I do want to slightly touch on, you're going to see it weave throughout my presentation, but you'll see how crisis is different from abuse. Okay. So I'm going to move on to my next slide here, and we're going to focus on what is crisis. Okay. Crisis happens when someone's inability to cope results in negative change in behavior. Okay. Crisis just means that it's not baseline. Okay. When we're happy, we're healthy, we've ate some dinner, we watched our favorite show, we're kind of sleepy but not there yet. I mean, that's right there. That's like the sweet spot, right? That's our baseline. Okay. Um, And there are things that can kind of take us up. Oh, it's someone's birthday. We're going to have some cake today. Like, I'm real excited. Can you tell, like, I'm obsessed with food? Um, and so then there's the negative ones. And that's where crisis happens, when we move into the negative space off of our baseline. Okay, so what are some of the things that contribute to our baseline or crisis? Okay, and these are called, and let me backtrack for a moment. Okay, you guys, you already know this. Okay, I just want to emphasize that you guys are doing a great job, and you already know this. My job is just to weave these all things together and connect the dots. And the second part of that is just to give a fancy technical name to concepts you already know. Switch back to the one previous to that. Thank you. Keep going. There we go. That's the one. And so things that we already know, I'm just giving words to them. So flipping back, some of that contributes to that baseline up and down are called setting factors. One of the biggest ones is culture. You know, I am Latina. I am also a light-skinned Latina, so I try to recognize where my privilege comes into play, how culture plays into my Americanness, and so on and so forth. So I gave a couple of examples here. You feel free to read them on the thing as I go. The other one is environment. So you guys ever hear nurture versus nature, all that kind of stuff? That's what they're talking about. So environment, this is what I like to call the I'm tired, I'm hot, I have to go to the bathroom. You know, there's just things that are happening in your surrounding, okay? And then the next one is going to be routines and activities. Children love routine, okay? It gives them a sense of structure and a dependability on like what's going to happen moment to moment. So I know that's one of the big things that CPS is focusing on right now, the remote learning. Why are we doing these sessions, right? One, because it's actually easier to get in touch with more parents at one time, but also we can do it leisurely at our time frame. You know, maybe I only got 5 minutes or maybe 15 minutes while I'm like cooking dinner or whatever, right? Or maybe like I decide like the kid like miraculously went to bed 15 minutes early and like I don't know what to do with myself. Remote learning, okay? And so the last one is like personal. This is what I like to call I'm all up in my feelings, okay? This is where like you just got a stank attitude when you woke up that morning and you don't know why, or like, you know, some lady bumped you in the grocery store and you're just like, oh, I swear to goodness, like, God bless her, you know, but you're just like, I don't know why I'm in a bad mood. Or sometimes it's just like, you know what, I'm just dating this new guy, and I'm taking it back for some of us, right? I'm dating this new guy and like I'm just so in love and everything is perfect and nothing can go wrong. So it's not always negative, right? And then relationship based. This is what I like to call like a personal childhood vendetta sometimes, where it's like mom said I couldn't have candy, so now we're in war. Like now it's just she can't do anything right. Or like the don't ask your dad, go ask your mom, or whatever, right? And so these are some of the things that can contribute to our baseline or why there's a bump, okay? Any questions so far? Okay. All right, I'm going to skip over to the next one, okay? So believe it or not, crisis begins with you, okay? And you're like, well, I'm not the one who's adding to the conflict. Well, of course not. But you are the one that can help with the conflict, that can help it not escalate from conflict to crisis. So I like to call this help me help myself, okay? There are 3 different types of people that are helpers, okay? The first one is where we want to focus, okay? And that's going to be called the educator, okay? Like educator by CPS, I want you guys to just remember that this is the happy spot, okay? This is where we take time to teach, okay? And a little bit over time becomes a lot. Okay, remember we talked about culture in the previous slide? When we create a pattern, we create a culture of what is our family dynamic, okay? Who are we as a family? What do we value, okay? And then I love this one. Every moment is a teaching opportunity, and this is where growth happens, okay? So if we're talking about like, I keep seeing these negative behaviors, that's where we take those teaching moments to kind of break some of those negative behaviors and reinforce positive ones. Now, this is sometimes where crisis is at. Any questions so far? Okay. This is where sometimes we live a little too comfortably, and that's called the firefighter, right? Firefighters don't necessarily like build the houses or different things like that, but they are the ones that come in emergencies, right? They're only there and then they leave right away. Okay, that's why we're so surprised when we see like these news stories, like the firefighter helped a guy with a heart attack and then he came back and mowed the lawn. We're like, what? That's not even his job. That's where we're kind of like moving into, yeah, I see y'all smiling. That's where we're moving into like the educator part versus firefighter, right? And then I always want to remind people that it's okay to visit sometimes there because it's necessary. Sometimes like this one's saying something and we got the other one over here and he's pulling her hair and I gotta make dinner. We gotta focus and just fight the fires where we can and then address them later on. Okay. Sometimes, but we want to remind people not to get too comfortable here because you're not going to be staying there too long. Remember that you're going to revisit it, because if you stay there, you're avoiding the root problem. Is it really that, he hates his sister, or that she can't stand her brother when he's practicing? No, it's because maybe something small or something big. It could be like, hey, I'm hungry and I've been waiting for dinner, or sometimes it's like, my brother said something to me in the car and you didn't hear it and now I'm upset. Okay. And then the last one, this is where, my training comes in. I like to say it this way. We all make mistakes, what I like to call oops and ouch moments. Oops, because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And ouch, like I didn't think that what I did was going to hurt your feelings. Okay. But what happens is that when we make mistakes, habit is where it starts to hurt. Okay. And love should never hurt. Okay. And obviously this kind of behavior can contribute to what we call maladaptive behavior. So it's feeding into the bad. That's like really the more basic way to say it. Okay. And then the thing with there's a big difference between like authoritarian. You might have heard that word thrown around. The parents like, because I said so. um, and then we can always add the dot 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 because of this reason. I like you guys when you're making your faces. um, and a difference between that and teaching them to be afraid of the punishment versus comfortable with changing that behavior. All right, we still good? Can I get a thumbs up to see we're still on the same page?
I am going to stop
Okay,
sharing
thank
for
you.
a second just to make sure
Yes,
that we don't have any questions in the chat, and it looks like we may have some questions.
thank you.
Oh, there are no questions. Any questions at this point? Okay, I think we're good to continue.
Okay, so we kind of talked about what your role as a parent is. Here are some of the things that you can do. This one, and like these are not pointed comments, I just think I so hilarious. Um, we want to remember that you are the adult. This is not the time to act childish, right? We have to be our highest and best self during this time, okay? Whenever we can. And then just remember that it's our responsibility as parents to be the bigger person. Okay. The next one is act like an adult, but think like a kid. Okay. I want us to take a break right now and think about, because we all have these moments, the ones that still really stick with us. When mom or dad, maybe even aunt or uncle, grandma, grandpa, did something to us and we're like, that's not fair. I don't know why they did that. And then the flip side of that, do we remember people saying to us, well, when you get older and you have kids, you'll figure it out,
No,
and
this
it's
is
not.
what my mother used to say. My mother
Yeah.
used to say, "Keep on living. You'll see what I'm talking about."
Yeah. So
Keep
that's
on
why
living.
we want to really tap into those are what's called a visceral memory. Those memories that give us a reaction, okay? That we remember vividly where we were, what we were doing, what it smelled like, what we were wearing. And as children, these are the moments that kind of mold us into who we want to be, not just as an adult, but if and when the time comes, how we want to be as a parent. So when we remember those things, you always hear it real dramatic in like a show, where it's like, when I grow up, I'm not ever going to be that way with my son, because these are the things, our sticking points, where we want to remember to, as an adult, act like an adult, but think how we did when we were a kid. Okay. And then who remembers the Calgon Take Me Away at the beginning of the session? Yeah, I see it. So, you sure did. This is where we like to do called the adult time out. Okay. So we like to see like these funny shows where they like to romanticize it, and mom's in her cashmere throw with a glass of wine and she's like, I'm having a timeout. Okay, that's not the real world though. Okay. So that's why we use our Calgon take me away moments. It's okay, and this is so funny because I used to be a counselor, and it's kind of funny to think if you need to tap out, take 10, 20, 30 seconds in your head to go, where is my happy place? What can I do there? Breathe in my place, in my particular scenario. Breathe in my sea air, and then come back to reality. And then tap back into your best and highest self. Okay? That's the big point of the adult timeout. Another big one that we see that's super popular is count to 10. And you can feel free to even say this to your kids. They can be used to it. They've heard it a million times, right? I'm going to need you to count to 10. You can flip that and say, Mom needs to take 10. I'll be with you in 10. And then keep going. The other side of that, and this one works with adults especially, so this one's good for your partner as well. Physically remove yourself from the situation if you need to. Look, if you got two kids going at it, this is the time to physically maybe intervene. But also remember the flip side of that. If it's like, okay, they're banging and making too much noise, I can go collect myself for a few minutes and then physically come back and I'm like ready to like charge. There is this like phenomenon with like thought processes. Do you ever enter a room and you're like, I forgot what I came in here for? It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same sort of effect on the flip side. When you remove yourself from the situation, you're able to think what we like to call your thinking brain, as opposed to your more emotional brain, where we just say things that we don't mean, or maybe do things that we regret, so on and so forth. Okay. And then the big one that I want to remind you, because I think that sometimes we're a little too hard on ourselves. We have to remember this is not rocket science, okay? Nobody gets award for parenting, okay? Which is a good thing. And sometimes it seems like, well, I do. I want the Oscar for best mom. But on the flip side of that, no one's judging you, okay? If they're happy, they're healthy, they're fed, they're clothed, they have a house, you're doing everything that you need to be doing. You know what I mean? If they know that they're loved, you're doing it, you know? And just remember that it's a learning curve. What did we say that what is the biggest thing that contributes to like the environment for the kids earlier on? Their routine. Okay, so how do you build a routine? I'm gonna flip that back to you guys.
How do you build a routine?
Yes. It's a real simple answer because I see some of y'all smiling like, I think I know the answer.
Well, let me just share that my daughter is
I'm going to ask that we keep our contributions short, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So go for it, Linda.
I hope I'm on the same page with y'all. My daughter's 43 and my grandson is 22. And I used to always, when I set the pattern by saying, you know what I just told you is not negotiable. And my daughter called me like years later and said,
that one.
She said, Mom, I really appreciate you telling me that. So now I tell Miles when she told my grandson, this is not negotiable. But that's probably not what you want to hear.
Yeah, remind me of that one. I do see a lot of comments though where it's like repetition, repetition, and I bet that's not the first time that you ever had to say that and that was it. I'm sure you had to repeat that same message, where that's also giving the deeper message that when mom says this, it means that there is no room to argue because she has a big reason behind it. Does that make sense? They might not understand that up here, but they feel that in here. Does that make sense?
We have some comments here that say doing the same thing over and over again, or you build a routine by repeating the same activity over and over. Do the same thing every day, maybe at the same time. And then another comment, the final comment, being consistent.
So guess what? You have created a stable household. Yay! So we have these concepts. We already know them and feel them in our hearts and bodies and souls, right? But like I said, I'm just giving you a fancier way. So like when you're having that moment where you're like, oh, am I a good parent or not? Just remember, I am building stability and consistency in my family, and just tap back in. Okay. And the last one is, just because we're adult doesn't mean that it's never too late to say sorry. Oops and ouch moments, right? Just because we might have said something in the heat of the moment doesn't mean that we can say, hey, I was not being my best self right then. And I'm sorry. I want to make sure that you're still feeling okay about this. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay.
Yep.
Can I get a thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Yay. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. So, how do we talked about what it is. We've talked about ourselves and what we're thinking and then what we're doing, right? The other thing is that how do we set the tone for support? Okay? If I can get the slides up, Norma, that would be really great.
All right, here they come.
Thank you. So, these are super simple, and I'm going to have people just go ahead and do in the comments of what they think some of these are, okay? And then any ideas that we'd like to share. These are ones that are based on therapeutic crisis intervention, okay? These are things that we can do to set the mood, okay? So not like bow chicka wow wow kind of set the mood. We're talking about like happy, healthy, children, okay? The first one is manage the environment. Remember I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I have to go to the bathroom. That's where we're like, okay, I'm going to get you a fan, I'm going to get you a glass of water, and why don't you go before we leave the house? Right? And then there's going to be prompting. So it's like, this is a, say it with me, non-negotiable. And then the big one, this one's for positive reinforcement, a caring gesture, okay? Thank you so much for being patient, for you guys for waiting for my presentation, and now all of a sudden like, oh, thank you so much, like I'm so glad to be here too, because it helps us reinforce that this behavior that we're doing is good. Okay. And then this one I like to call shiny object, okay? This is called redirection and distraction. Did you ever have that when like you see him like with his sister and like he's got that look, right? This never happened with my brother, thank goodness. where you're just like, oh, something's about to happen. So you're like, you know what? I'm gonna need you to help me over here. I need you to cut the vegetables up, and like, oh, you're doing such a great job. What did I do there? Combine two things to set the tone. You see what I did there? And then all of a sudden he's not focused on his sister anymore. Okay. And then this one's my other favorite. This one. What we all call that's church face, right? The like, I came and sat by you, I put my hand on your lap, and it's like, you know what this means, right? That I'm watching you. That could be positive and that can be negative, right? It could also be like, whoo, I see he's getting real anxious, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna come over here, put a little arm around him, right? I don't have to say anything to him, he's gonna calm down, right? Okay, and then there's directive statements. I understand that you want to do this, but first we're going to do this. When you're done with that, then we're going to do this. So that's when you're going to be really clear, concise, and not arguing about it, right? The other one is time away. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And then this one's kind of, you have to know your partner or your child really well to know when this one's going to work, right? Because if he's getting like back and forth, the kids are getting into it, planned ignoring is not really going to help the situation. But if he's like, and you're like, can't listen to you when you're talking to me like that. And then you turn your back and you go back to your topic while, really just still keep an ear out for him. That's kind of that planned ignoring, as opposed to like, what, huh? I don't know what's going on. So too many things at once. That one's a little more distracted than ignoring. Does that make sense to everyone? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. So this is a good time. I want to check in with you guys. What are some examples of these things that we like to do to keep our house stable, to keep us at baseline? Go ahead and put it in the comments, or if you feel comfortable, tap in with a comment?
So it looks like people are typing.
Take a time out to talk. Me, my son is actually where he's
time
at.
out.
He's on, if he's on video game mode, talk in video game mode to him.
Yeah, I love that. Switch it up. We talk in the language that they understand. Real nice. Let's get one more. I'll wait.
Do you want to ask the question again? Oh, prayer. Somebody said prayer.
Yeah, so someone said prayer, right? So sometimes for example, I'll use one that we do sometimes is that you've set the meal, someone set the plate, right? Mom's maybe dishing it up, someone else is getting napkins and plates and stuff, and then we take a deep breath, we hold hands and remind each other, this is a time for family, this is a time for thanks, and this is something that we can do every day. And so even I noticed when I was a kid, I can remember specific kids who would just put the little napkin in their their dress shirt or whatever, and then just real quick, and then dig it, okay? Because these are the things that resonate throughout their life. They carry that in different places, even outside of the home. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on. If anybody has any questions yet right now. Okay, so the other thing that we want to do, and this one kind of is in that middle ground, keeping with setting the tone for support. These ones we kind of already have talked about a little bit. I'll just hit them real quick. Listen and one back. Listen and validate. Let them vent, okay? Remember that we're listening to understand, not to respond. We're really good at knowing where our kids are at, what they're thinking, what they're doing. We ever hear that? We know you better than you know yourself. It's not about knowing them. It's about letting them explain it to you. Does that make sense? Giving them that space. Encouraging them to communicate as well. Just reiterating, negative feelings are okay. It's the behavior that's not okay. And we sometimes forget about this. Kids, usually depending on their age, don't start developing different emotions until earlier on. A small child, like a toddler, even a baby, they're either happy or they're angry. Then they start to maybe understand what sadness is. Sometimes they learn what ecstatic is versus I'm just annoyed. So that's when they come secondary and tertiary emotions. So that's a little fancy word for y'all. Okay, we want real basic with the small children, and then they become that preteen and they start getting those real confused feelings, right? This is when they start understanding that the world is just not black and white. But we have to remind them that anger is still healthy to feel it, but not put it in a way that's going to hurt themselves or others. Okay, support. Okay, show up and say that you love them. Be there for them. That's one of the biggest things that a lot of people remember as they grow up. I remember we might not have had the most expensive things. We might not have gone to the fanciest places, but my mom always showed up to my baseball games. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, of course, the one that we touched about already, teach for the future, right? We want to validate the feelings and not the future. This is the big one. Give them the alternative to the negative behavior. You guys remember when your little 4-year-old decided, I'm gonna dress myself today, and so then you'd be like, do you want to wear the dress or you want to wear the overalls? They were getting dressed in one of these two or the other, right? We give them that little bit of freedom that they're needing at the level that they need it, right? Do you want to go out with your friends, but you got to come home at 10? Make sense? So it's always age appropriate. Okay. And then this one is where we're going to throw some fancy words again. You guys remember baseline? Baseline just means normal. This one's another one. You might have heard this one in your trauma session. Triggers. Okay. Think about it. And I hate to get a violent example. That's what's coming to my mind right now. What shoots the gun? The trigger, right? It has to be something, what's called a precipitating event that leads to that, okay? That explosion. And so this was also what I like to call that spidey sense, okay? Who has kids who are into comic books? All right? This is where they're like, oh my goodness, I feel a change in the winds. You know, you're like, yeah, my kid's going to be hungry right now. And you're like, what? How does she know? Well, she just knows. Practice, knowing her kids, maybe because I'm hungry myself. Okay? Any questions so far? All right. I think
No questions.
Yeah.
No questions.
Okay. All right. So what do we do? The next slide, please. So what do we do when I like to call troubles a brewing? Okay. First thing that we want to do is emotional first aid. Identify the ouchie and put a Band-Aid on it. Okay. This is when we're going to use our higher thinking skills and put them in action. Okay. This is where you're going to get those practices. Okay. Right. When a kid falls down, what do? We dust them off and say, walk it off. So just kind of remember.
What do you mean by fall down?
So like a baby, when they fall down, help them up, right? Help them up. We can help them up. What else do we do? Do we carry him the rest of the day?
No.
No. Why?
They got to get over it. When my grandson used to hurt himself, I used to tell him, just shake it off, shake it off.
Right.
And
so
he shook it off.
Learn, tell him that it's going to be okay. We have to like normalize that ouchies are a part of life.
Right.
Some of them are big ouchies and we're going to give more attention to them. And some of them are like, walk it off, kid. You got this. This not going to hold you back, right? Keep moving on. So go back one. And then we're going to talk about agitation, aggression versus outburst, okay? So agitation is like something's itchy under the skin. They're not sitting still and they're kind of raising their voice. And that's when they're kind of like, this is when we're going to do like those beginning things, like remember those setting factors, okay? The next one is going to be aggression. Aggression is not, in this context, in this scenario that we're talking about, is not necessarily violent, okay? It just means like they're getting really big with their movements, or they're using like, oh, I can't believe you just used that word, you know, like, or under their breath, right? Or what I like to call the I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. By the way, my mom used to have the perfect answer to that. Are you in your sister's personal space? And I'd be like, you're in my personal space, right? Because that's when we start to get aggressive, right? And then the last one is outburst, which is like, duh, right? We know what an outburst is, right? A tantrum. Okay. And then another thing that I want to point out that makes this successful, when things start to kind of bring it up. Remember when we said that as an adult, we can go out of the situation? Sometimes we have to remind our children that they can be removed from the situation. You'd be surprised that the more that they kind of learn this, that they might give themselves a timeout. So coming back to that is that you want to make this if you're going to try and correct a behavior or address a situation that is off of their baseline, you want to make it as private as you can. Whether that's like coming down to their level, kind of lowering your voice a little bit, or if it means like actually moving to another room. These are ways that we can do it so that they feel like the attention's on them. And their needs, as opposed to like, I'm pulling you aside and punishing you for your behavior. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, of course, what I like to call observe and report. Okay. I see this. How are you feeling? Give them the opportunity to put a name to what you see. Okay. If they're having a hard time, you can even say, like, I see that you're kind of like, you know, let me use this one. Like, do you ever see little kids when they're like with their legs in between and you're like, you seem kind of like anxious. Do you need to go to the bathroom? And they're like, right? Because we got to remind them. And then also remember back to the dungarees or the dress, offer positive alternatives and let them choose. Okay. Because they have to take that choice as their own. Why? Because if they think that it's their parents doing it for them, it's not going to make a long-term change. Sometimes we do this automatically. Sometimes they're just kind of like, what did I say? And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to choose to pipe down, right? Like sometimes we have those great kids, right? And sometimes we're like, Do you remember what we talked about earlier? And they're like, okay, I gotta think about it. So they're not really talking with their heart, they're thinking with their head. Does that make sense? Okay, and then coming back to it, limit the amount of options. You're not gonna say like,
Yep.
what do you want to do? Because they're not, I want to play video games and eat ice cream. No, it's not time for that. What would you like to do? Would you like an extra 5 minutes? Or would you like to come to dinner now? Okay, well, if you want 5 minutes, you're going to have to do this, right? And I see people nodding their heads. They're like, yep, I know. I've used that one before. I'm not above bribery, so I'm going to throw that in there right now, too. Okay, and then the last one, you have to remember, what is your ultimate goal? This one, I probably should have put like with little stars and double bold and everything. But what is our goal of doing all of this? We want to get them back in the game, okay? We want to get them back to baseline. Not just baseline off in a corner thinking about what they did. No, we want them to make sure that they are going back to their routine, okay? And then, of course, pick and choose your battles. Maybe you'll win the battle but lose the war, okay? Sometimes as parents, we have to think 2, 3, 10 steps ahead. And that is not necessarily just like in the moment. That's like, if I think ahead, I'm preparing for their future. And sometimes we don't stop and think about that, you know? But I know that that's what we're doing with our positive behavior. I know that's what you guys are doing. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So the next one we're going to talk about, the volcano has happened. What are we going to do? I like to try to keep this super basic, okay? We're going to talk about do's and don'ts. And of course, like, these are suggestions. You can modify them and kind of word them in ways that you understand. These are just kind of like some of the big ones that I'd like to touch on, okay? Well, number one, don't feed into the negative behavior. Because once you have, they've already won. All right? This is actually really great for adults as well. This is what I like to call, if you're going to be like this, I'm going to need you to calm down, and then you can come talk to me, okay? Because when we do that, when we engage with that, we're reinforcing like, hey, if I shout and scream and make a mess, mom's going to come running. Does that make sense? Same sort of scenario. Don't match body language and tone. Do we see, like, when we go like this, listen, okay? Because now guess what? I've made big gestures and you're like, what is she doing? And now I've gotten in your personal space, right? Remember I mentioned that earlier? And we don't want to match our tone. Like, we want to be the cool-headed one in the situation. So if I start talking like this, people are gonna, I can already start to see it. People are moving closer to the screen because they're like, oh, this person's engaging me. So what we can do is remember, I think I'm going to touch on that in a little bit more detail later on, but remember that part of that is not just what we say, it's what we do and how we say it, okay? And then, of course, the big one. The volcano has happened. It's okay. It's normal. Don't avoid conflict, because conflict lets us know that something isn't working. Okay. And then this is my favorite one. This is don't belittle, blame, or attack. Remember, when we're trying to correct something, we're not correcting the very being that they are, because remember, their whole existence is what they do and say and think, you know? We are trying to correct the behavior, okay? And then get at the root of the emotions, okay? And then, of course, like, if they hear, well, that, and I'm using these words that I don't like to use, but like, that is so stupid, you know? All they hear is stupid. Does that make sense? Or as like a teenager, it's like, look, I don't think you're stupid. I think that the behavior that you chose was stupid. Do we see the difference in those two messages?
Yep.
And then imagine trying to say that last one to like a 7-year-old. They might not get that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I see people like, yup.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, yes. No? Okay. The last one, these are the more positive ones, okay? Make your expectations and intentions clear and understandable, but be flexible. Okay, remember I mentioned I'm not above bribing? Remember, like, sometimes, like, I remember a client that I worked with, one of the most brilliant things that she said, that she went to a specific grocery store because the bakery used to give out cookies to kids. And she was a little kid, and she's like, it's just one cookie, one really big cookie once a week. If I can get her, and she was not a good eater either, if I can get her to sit still for the amount of time it takes her to eat this cookie, I'm already at the checkout line. So keep in mind that, like, sometimes we're like, I'm only going to feed my baby organic things, and they're not going to play any video games and not watch any TV. Who's laughing at that person right now, right? You're like, I'll take the 5 minutes that I can get sometimes, you know? So just be compassionate about yourself. Like, make sure that your end goal is to keep them in the game, to keep them happy, healthy, fed, clothed, homed, okay? Be patient. Duh, right? Show compassion. You are listening to understand, not listening to talk, even though I've talked a lot today, right? And then keep lines of communications open. Even though they might not be the best at expressing themselves when they're in crisis, remember, because they're not at baseline. Either it's like, do you ever get the kids where maybe they're in crisis, but they actually look really happy? And you got the mom like, oh, put down, like, this is not the time. And they're like, I'm just like really excited. And you're like, okay, I understand, but let's bring you down. It's crisis and conflict are not always bad things. Okay? And then the last one, focus on the future, right? We are building a, say it with me, routine. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Yeah? All right. So the next one is we're going to do, so we've been focusing a lot about preparing ourselves, a little bit all over the place. Guess what happens? Oops, my bad. I'm the one that exploded. What can I do? Okay. The first thing that you can do is, there are stages of preparing, right? Because repetition. I'm stealing your guys' answers and putting them in motion, okay? Keep in mind that there are things that you can do to prepare so that we can avoid the conflict, right? We already talked about those, right? Which is remember your own coping skills before you dive into a situation, okay? The other one is always be respectful, right? These are things that you can prepare so that you don't lose your head. And then while the conflict is happening, it's important not to lose sight of the end goal, right? And get them back on track. And then forget about winning and losing. It's not about winning and losing. It's like, dang, I got him to do what I wanted. But if he goes away with his tail between his legs, then maybe we didn't do it right. You know what I'm saying? Okay. And then this is the one that I told you guys I was gonna touch on right now. Body language and voice. So I already talked about like sorry, let me just take a look at my little thing. It wants to close up my computer, sorry. All right. So we talked about a little bit about body language, right? So if I'm like sitting here and like presenting to you guys and I'm like, that is the most boring and disrespectful thing that I can do. You know what I mean? There are ways that you can tell that I'm like, you know, like, I'm waiting for your excuses, right? And opposed to like, okay, tell me what happened. You know, our body language, our meaning of what we say is 55%, and this is based on actual research, 55% facial, tone. So we got like our other favorite, right? As parents, I don't like your tone, young man, right? Little miss, I'm gonna need you to change that tone. Or my personal favorite, I like to tell my husband all the time, I'm gonna need you to take that bass out of your voice because I can't help myself. And then the last part, what we say is really only 7% of what we do, right? Like imagine getting a package of Oreos and you're like, 10% Oreo. What 10% Oreos? That's like the tiniest part. That's a corner of the package of Oreos, you know? We want the whole bag of Oreos, okay? And then the last one, of course, is like lower your voice. The big thing that when people raise their voice, they want to move away from you. When you lower your voice, people want to come near you, okay? And then the last one, remember, if it's already happened, there are still things that you can do. The biggest one, apologize. You know, while it sometimes like feels like, oh man, I got to eat some crow right now, or like me as an adult, like I see people nodding like, I shouldn't have to do that. Well, yes, you do, because guess what? Your focus is that relationship. that relationship, that routine. Okay, it's okay to backtrack. And do you ever see this, especially in movies like, you know what? Hold on a minute. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but you really hurt my feelings right there. Do you ever see that? We want to remember that it never is too late for that, okay? And then ask yourself, after this is all done, have a moment of reflection. Like, is there anything I could have done better the next time? You know, you can always come back and explain to them, what mom was focused on, just making sure that the tire was fixed, and I wasn't thinking about dinner. I'm sorry, hon. Okay. And then reset the tone. What did we just learn? Those setting factors. What are things? Did you ever see like those little? Oh, okay, this makes me think of a movie way back when, like One Fine Day, where she like has this giant purse, right? And she starts pulling out dinosaurs and like a juice box and like a cape, and all of a sudden these kids are ready for daycare and all is well in the world, right? Sometimes that's all it takes is like, a quick little costume change, and we can get back on track. Right? Put your Wonder Woman cape back on and you're like, okay, I can do this. I am super mom, I am super parents, and just remember your highest and best self, okay? And then the last time, show the love, okay? Show them that what you want and need from them is about loving them, okay? I do believe that I have just one more big slide, so I kind of want to breeze through that really quickly, just because I know we're running out of time right now. So if I can throw these last two slides up on the screen, if that's okay. So I like to make my jokes, right? And I'm like already said like, oops, my bad. But when does my bad become abusive? Okay. The first thing that we should always remember, love shouldn't hurt. Okay. Sometimes remember I talked earlier about they sometimes ascribe the behavior change to the punishment as opposed to like positive change. This is what we call trauma bonding. Okay. There's like, I'm doing this for your own good. Well, no one should be hurt for their own good. Okay. We have to keep that in mind to remember that. And sometimes that really chafes. I mean, I'm only going to speak about my culture. Sometimes we're like the pow pow or like the chancla, we all know about that one. But guess what? We all laugh about it, but there's a little part of us inside that died a little bit when that happened to us. Okay. So we have to remember that love shouldn't hurt. Okay. The other big thing is to remember, especially when we have like cultural norms that are challenged and we're saying like, well, that's not right. It's not about right or wrong. It's about healthy, unhealthy, and abusive. Okay. Healthy behavior is making choices that are positive and loving and contribute to growth. Now, this is where we get in kind of that gray area. Unhealthy is like we're not aware that our behavior is negative, that we don't know how to fix it. Like, okay, yeah, I know that this is probably not the best thing. Remember we talked about don't get comfortable as a firefighter? Because sometimes if you're firefighting, if you change it, it can become an educator. If we don't change it, it becomes abusive. And abusive, we have to remember, is choosing to harm, okay? We're choosing not to change that behavior, okay? And we're not caring about a person's well-being or feelings, okay? The big contributor to this one, because we're like, oh man, Eva, I feel like a terrible human being. Just the other day, I yelled at my kid. That's a little bit different than it becoming a pattern. If you become a yelling mom, as I like to call it, then maybe we need to think about how is my communication style affecting my kid. Maybe not that cerebrally. Maybe we can bring it down a little bit. How can I not yell anymore? Or yell less, okay? Because if we're trying to fix it, we're trying to move from unhealthy to healthy. Make sense? Okay, and then, let me see. It can happen. So we have to remember that a pattern of abuse is called domestic violence. Okay. And it can happen between anybody who has a family connection. Okay. This is sometimes where we talk about how the relationship, maybe we're not like, the stereotype beating our kids, but mom and dad are not right. Okay. That there's something not healthy going on between mom and dad. And we want to make sure that our bigger picture that it's, I focused on kids today and I kind of talked about how we can apply some of this to our partner, but sometimes we're not the ones that need to make the change. It's our partner. So that leads me into my last thing. Can abusive behavior be fixed? First of all, it has to focus on the abuser, okay? We can do and say and love someone until we can change them, but really that's not healthy and that's not a reality. A person has to want to change. Okay, the abuser has to be the one that wants to change. We can put boundaries in and say like, hey, we can't be together if this doesn't change. But we also have to remember we got to stick to that. Why? For our healthy well-being. But also remember that we got to throw it back on them, because it is not our responsibility to change an abuser. They have to want to change themselves, okay? And then we have to make sure that they make amends with not only words, but actions, okay? And this has to be a maintained change. If someone comes and, hey, baby, I love you, buys you hearts and chocolates and, takes you out, and then the same thing happens next week, guaranteed you're not going to be looking at that box of chocolates and flowers the same way the second time it happens, And sometimes it's about putting those boundaries in and thinking about the greater well-being. And sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. So that's when we bring in the professionals. So I've put on some resources here, just very scraping the surface. Did I just say service? Scraping the surface of where you can start. The best one, and remember that this is not just men to women. Sometimes it's men to men, women to men, or between women and women, okay? Because we have to remember abuse can happen in any kind of relationship, okay? So we have to remember that there are hotlines that are available 24 hours and 7 days a week, including holidays, including weekends, okay? The resources for Spanish, this is one of my personal favorites, Mujeres Latinas en Acción. They also do services with children and in court. I come from an agency that used to do domestic violence help. They had court help, they did English, they did Spanish. So the reason why I included this last one, the DuPage County, is because for whatever reason, maybe we're a professional in our own life and we don't want people knowing our business. That sometimes is a big debtor for us getting help. So I want to remind people that they can always come out of that location to get services elsewhere. And there's places, if you need me to tap into them, as far as Elgin is down south of Springfield that I know about. And so the last thing that I want to do is just recap about what we learned. Setting factors, help me help myself. Set the tone. Begin de-escalation, what I like to call volcano cleanup. Love shouldn't hurt. And remember that we do have resources available for you if you need them, okay? I want to just also remind you guys, my last one, that nobody's perfect, okay? You are doing the best that you can, and you're doing a great job. Just by being here today, I can feel the love, and I know that you guys are, already one step ahead, okay? So show the love. Remember that prep is the key, and it's never too late, and love shouldn't hurt. Thank you guys for letting me present today. I would like to just say one last thing. Speaking of let's spread the love and let's focus on love shouldn't hurt. I want you guys to do real serious, okay? I'm going to do a stretching exercise, okay? I need you to put your left hand on your right shoulder, okay? And then your right hand on your left shoulder. And then you're going to just go like this back and forth and make a real cheesy smile and say, I love you best.
I love you back.
Yeah, I tricked you guys, didn't I? Remember that love starts here, and we want to spread the love, right? Because when that negative stuff happens, you'll be so surprised how much we can tamp down those volcano smoke with just a little bit of love. Okay? Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I know that I did go over. You're welcome. I know that I did go over